Throne and Liberty has been out on global release for almost 2 months now, and in that time I've clocked around 375 hours. There are tons of reviews out there, but as someone who went into the game blind and learned a lot of hard lessons, I figured it's time to share my thoughts. Whether you're on the fence about playing this MMO or just curious, I've got you covered. First, let's address the elephant in the room. Pay to win. How bad is it really? I know the phrase pay to win is enough to send most people running for the hills, and I get it. It's one of the most annoying trends in gaming. But in Throne and Liberty, it feels a little different. Sure, you've got the whales dropping $1,000 to snag the best gear, weapons, and traits, but how much does that actually matter? At its core, this is a PvP game. More specifically, it's a guild versus guild game. Your guild fights another guild 80% of the time, so team composition and actual skill play huge roles. You can't swipe your way to understanding your class or countering someone else's. Swiping might give you a 5-day head start, but after that, everyone evens out. Now don't get me wrong, it is technically pay to win, especially in PvP, but I'd call it pay to be slightly ahead for a minute. You can't buy gear and weapon upgrades, skill books, or weapon masteries. You still have to grind like everybody else. And honestly, watching a whale get stomped by a group of coordinated free-to-play players is incredibly satisfying. Now that we've tackled pay to win, let's dive into combat. Throne and Liberty uses a tab targeting system, and let me tell you, it's rough. I am not a fan. They could have taken notes from other tab targeting games like World of Warcraft, but instead, large-scale battles turn into a chaotic mess of random targeting. Thankfully, the Astral Vision system lets you filter targets, but it's far from perfect. That said, combat has its moments. Every skill feels impactful. The animations are buttery smooth, and the automatic weapon swapping per skill is seriously cool. I've played with almost every weapon at this point, and they're all fun in their own way. PvE is where the freedom to experiment shines. As long as you know your class and you mix your skills well, you'll find some devastating combos. Watching my fireballs and arrows weave together with ice spikes and lightning is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in a game. In PvP though, meta builds dominate. If you go off meta, prepare to work 10 times harder and die 100 times more. But hey, at least you'll be unique. One of the biggest pillars of Throne and Liberty is guilds. You're encouraged to join a guild through the story, but honestly it's basically a requirement. Sure, you can solo queue with randoms and make friends along the way, but without a guild you'll miss out on major guild versus guild content like the boon and rift stones, sieges, the tax event, and conflict bosses where PvP determines your loot. Guilds are the heart of this game's longevity. On one hand, alliances between top guilds can create massive zergs, which is a valid complaint that most players share. On the other hand, when zerg meets zerg, it's ridiculously fun. Your guild also provides access to perks like the guild hall, guild bosses, and an exclusive vendor. Let's talk about the auction house. At level 40, you unlock the auction house, and you will quickly see that every item requires Lucent, which is the game's paid currency. My first thought was, great, here come the greedy dev practices. But then I realized you can earn Lucent just by playing the game. Almost every piece of gear can be sold on the auction house for Lucent, with a small fee paid in Solent, which is the in-game gold that you earn just from playing. In my first weeks, I made around 10,000 Lucent without spending a dime. That's plenty enough to gear up and splurge a little bit in the shop on cosmetics and morphs. What's cool is that the whales fuel the economy. They buy gear, you get paid, and everyone benefits. It's like an ecosystem. Whales swipe, you grind, and the devs keep the servers running. The graphics in Throne and Liberty are phenomenal. Every zone feels lovingly crafted, from tiny details to the sweeping landscapes, and if you're lucky enough to play on max settings, the game is a visual masterpiece. That said, performance takes a hit in crowded zones. Even with my Ryzen 9 and my 3070 Ti, I've had to drop settings to medium or even low during big events. Despite the occasional lag, the visuals are stunning. Whether you're wandering through the serene landscape or diving into an abyssal dungeon, this game's world is a feast for the eyes. Now for the weakest link, the story. I could not tell you about the plot or its major events aside from the very end, which I will not spoil. The dialogue is bland and halfway through I found myself skipping most of it. Why do we have guardian powers? What's the deal with the sentient stuffed animals? Why can we shapeshift? The game throws a lot at you without tying it all together, but honestly, the story doesn't matter much in a PvP focused game, but still, the first 30 hours of a story-driven gameplay might feel like a slog, especially if you're a new player. Finally, let's talk about the endgame. What is it like once you've hit level 50? The gameplay loop revolves around daily co-op dungeons, resistance contracts, abyssal tokens, world bosses, and arc boss events twice a week. Throw in cooking, fishing, and guild activities, and you'll never run out of things to do. The grind is rewarding if you enjoy chasing gear and power. Now, I've swapped builds twice, which slowed my progress, but I'm still sitting at 3,320 gear score after 375 hours. So if you find a class you love, stick with it and save yourself some extra grind. Throne and Liberty is not for everyone. If the pay-to-win mechanics or lackluster story are deal breakers for you, this might not be your game. But for players like me, it's been hundreds of hours of fun and camaraderie. The game definitely has room to grow, but it's free to play and it offers plenty to enjoy if you're smart with your time and your resources. If this review helped you, or even if you disagree, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.